The Synod itself, taking place around the 50th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council, and with Pope Benedict's decision to open the Year of Faith, I think there are some significant coincidences, if you will, deliberate choices being made in reality that need to be highlighted. I think the deliberate commitment, renewal of a commitment on the part of all of the Synod Fathers to renew the ongoing implementation of Vatican Council II, of promoting the life of the Church in the world today, to continuing ecumenical dialogue, are some of the areas that are both challenges and yet significant commitments in terms of what went on during the Synod. We've spoken about the presence of religious life as a part of that. I think that within the message that was prepared for the end of the Synod to all the people of God, as it is addressed, was a very joyful, uplifting message, but also very realistic, recognizing the challenges that the Church has to face in a society that, at least in some areas, is becoming more and more deafened to the message of the gospel, to the presence of God. Some of those challenges really need to be taken on, and yet I think that the optimistic spirit, the hope-filled spirit that was a part of the Synod really is something that needs to be communicated effectively to the people who are listening, the people who are already with us, if you will, and that together we all need to take very seriously our commitment, which comes from baptism, that all of us together have a responsibility to share the good news, to share the gospel with the world around us. In terms of experience, again, I'll come back to St. Augustine, someone who we as Augustinians certainly appreciate and know very well. But I would say that Augustine is one of the Church Fathers who very clearly spoke about experience. And one of the reasons that the Confessions continues to be one of the widest read books in the history of the world is precisely because of Augustine's insight into human experience. And he does a magnificent job of communicating both his own experience and what he lived, and how that experience can indeed be a window, if you will, an opening to discovering a personal experience of God in human life. Human experience, he says, is precisely where you can find God. And the humanity of Augustine is not something which leads into a kind of a personalized, egoistic, it's all about me and only me world, but quite the opposite. Because of Augustine's understanding of humanity, that human experience is actually the door that leads one into discovering who God is, and then a movement that Augustine speaks of in different areas about how going into God also leads you into solidarity with other people. And that second part of living in solidarity with others is perhaps a piece of the experience that is missing nowadays. So often today, in the highly individualistic society that people are growing up in, people think that my experience is the criteria, am I happy or I'm not happy? What that might really be is, do I feel pleasure or don't I feel pleasure? Or do I feel selfish? And if I feel okay, then that's all that matters. And I think that certainly Augustine's experience says that, well, that isn't enough, and maybe what you're calling happiness isn't authentic happiness, because you're going to lose that too. And most things that people seem to describe as, well, why are you happy today, are things that are either very superficial or at best important for a short period of time, but that aren't going to last forever. And Augustine gives some insight into helping people understand that having an experience of God brings you far beyond yourself, and includes that dimension of, what I would call human solidarity, of understanding the universal brotherhood, sisterhood of men and women and that how an authentic experience of happiness has to include other people and has to include being concerned about other people. And those are elements that express, I think, a very important part of the gospel message. It's not just about me and my experience of God either. You might have people say, oh, I have an experience of God and I don't have to do anything else. Well, then that's probably not an authentic experience of God, because as we know from the Gospels, as we know from the apostolic letters, if you love God, then you also need to be showing that by loving your neighbor, and that the two go hand in hand. And so experience can be a wonderful tool, if you will, to help bring people into an experience of Christ in their lives, of God in their lives. Augustine in the Confessions talks about friendship, talks about family, talks about the importance of his mother, talks about his father, talks about human ambition, talks about so many different aspects of human life, and then goes on to explain how these things helped or did not help his own personal pathway to discovering God and to discovering what is really holy about life. So I think that this openness to experience is not something that is new, but something that's being rediscovered, and that there are great treasures to be discovered there if, once again, people understand we're not talking about it's how I want to do it, but rather how my understanding my life can lead me into a much fuller understanding of what humanity is about, what human life is about, and therefore what the encounter with God is about. It is precisely when one sits down and begins to reflect upon those ultimate questions that a choice is available to us. And I think that someone who, if you will, rationally and logically wants to embrace some kind of atheism, if we can call it that, if any true atheists do exist, that's a rather pessimistic and dark way to understand what life is about. And I think that the wisdom of the fathers, the wisdom of the church through centuries, the wisdom and the universal dimension of, if you will, religious experience shows that there is much more to life than that. And that, as a matter of fact, it isn't all dark. And that when one comes to discover this present history, that it is something which goes far beyond anything that the superficial world of spectacle can offer to us. And I think that the wisdom of the ages, if you will, along with the experience that we can indeed live, the peace, the true sense of happiness that those who do search for God in their lives, the happiness that they can find is indeed a gift that shows us what real truth is about, that shows us what real life is about, and gives us an understanding to what the meaning of life is.